It's 5:30 on November 13th, 2024. So we're going to start this Salt Lake City Planning Commission meeting. Sure. The first thing we'll do from the agenda is the report of the chair, and I don't have anything to report.
And I have nothing to report. Thank you.
Now we have a report of the Planning Division Director.
We've lost our top to the microphone somewhere. So, just a couple updates. So, just as the Planning Commission meetings are narrowed down towards the end of the calendar year, so the City Council. So, they had a council meeting yesterday, and they've got 3 more scheduled for the year. And the big ticket item on that relates to the Planning Commission is the Rocky Mountain Power Site / Fair Park rezone. So they had their first briefing on that yesterday. They'll have another follow-up that focuses on the zoning tomorrow. And then they have until their last scheduled meeting is December 10th, where they have to make a decision on both the zoning and the development agreement. So we're going to be meeting with the applicant, council, mayor's office, et cetera, over the next several weeks to try to hammer out that development agreement before the council has to make a decision by the end of the year. And that's all I had.
When is the public meeting on that proposal, on the fairground proposal?
I'm sorry, what was that?
When is the public meeting for the city council?
Oh, the public hearing is next Tuesday.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Evening, right? Not during the work set, evening.
Thank you. The next item is an open forum where the commissioners may discuss planning, zoning, and general land use items. Does anyone have anything to discuss? No. All right. We'll move to the consent agenda. We have 4 items on the consent agenda today. The first is an extension request for plan development at approximately 602 East, 300 South, and 612 East, 300 South, and 321 South, 600 East. The second is an extension request for design review approval at approximately 336 South, 300 East. The third item is a conditional use for the Samoan Independent Seventh-day Association of Churches at approximately 1624 South, 1000 West. This item has a public hearing. And the other thing on the consent agenda is approval of the meeting minutes from October 8th. So I'm going to open the public hearing for item number 3 from the consent agenda, which is the conditional use for the Samoan Independent Seventh-day Association of Churches. If anyone would like to speak on this item, you may approach the podium and state your name and give your comments. I don't see anyone to speak on that, so I'll close the public hearing. It's now time for the commission to have a discussion or for a motion on the consent agenda.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion from Commissioner Krasik and a second from Commissioner Mike Christensen. Any discussion on that motion? Okay, we're going to have a vote. Commissioner Scheer.
Yes to the items 1, 2, and 3, and I was not present at the October 8th. So I will abstain.
Thank you. Commissioner Scott?
Yes.
Commissioner Berry?
Yes.
Commissioner McCall Christensen?
Yes.
Commissioner Mike Christensen?
Yes on items 1, 2, and 3, and I will abstain on the minutes since I was.
Thank you. Commissioner Krasik?
Yes.
And I will also vote yes. So the consent agenda is unanimously approved with 2 abstentions on the minutes for October 8th. Thank you. Some people are leaving because the consent agenda is done. So now we'll move to the regular agenda. The first item on our regular agenda is design review for 850 apartments at approximately 850 West, 100 South. I'll have the planner introduce himself and give us a presentation. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ben, and this is, where are these PowerPoints located? On the desktop. Found it. All good. Great. So this is the design review petition at 850 West, 100 South. Some quick overview for you. This is 46 units, 6 one-bedroom units, and 40 studios on 0.2 acres, located within the TSA UNT district. They are providing 6 parking stalls, and only 3 are required. This project did receive TSA approval in early October, but they did not meet design review or design standards, so that's why they are here for this meeting. They are requesting 5 modifications to the design standards. They are the ground floor use and visual interest, ground floor depth reduction, an increase in setbacks, an increase in blank wall length, and moving the entrance to a ground floor residential unit, excuse me. Staff is recommending approval with the condition that final review of the development is delegated to staff, including compliance with design review standards J and L. This is a rendering of the project, and we will move to the existing site. This photo on the left is from Jeremy Street, and the photo on the right is from the intersection of First South and Jeremy Street. The site is currently vacant, and it has been for a couple of years. Along the park strip on 100 South on the north side, there are some high voltage transmission lines that run the length of this neighborhood, and these have impacted this project, and we'll get into that here in just a few minutes. But first, the ground floor use and visual interest option does require Planning Commission approval regardless of the amount they approve. They are providing 60.2% ground floor use. 60% is required, so they meet that. And then visual interest is required at 25%, and they are providing 31%. The ground floor use here is 4 residential units, and then the visual interest is through some angled glass that is intended to increase pedestrian interaction and interest in the building through various colors and reflections. And then in visual, the unit on the left that is labeled visual interest A, they have had to reduce the depth of that unit from 25 feet to 23 feet 4.5 inches due to the location of that transformer that you can see kind of at the very top left of that render. And the blank wall max in the TSA district is 15 feet. The applicant is proposing 15 feet and 3 inches. This is due to the location of the transformer. Operable openings are not allowed within 10 feet of the transformer. Non-operable openings are allowed within 5 feet. That pushes them to 15 feet 3 inches. there's that window there. It's not operable, but it does help them lower that blank wall to as low as possible. And then additionally, because of that code, they have had to move the entrance to this residential unit to the west facade because no operable openings within 10 feet, 10 horizontal feet, so that's been moved to just around the corner. Increased setbacks. The TSA district requires 50% of all street-facing facades to be within 5 feet of the property line. Because of these high voltage transmission lines, Rocky Mountain Power requires a 25-foot setback, and this has increased the average setback to 12.5 feet. This does impact all of the properties along the side of this neighborhood because of those transmission lines. Development of the property would be pretty limited due to those. This project is compatible with 3 different city plans, Housing SLC, Plan Salt Lake, and the North Temple Boulevard Plan. Most of the things that they are compatible with include housing, increasing density, and increasing density around transportation options in areas that have amenities. And again, our recommendation is approval with the condition that the final review of the development is delegated to staff for compliance with design review standards J and L. And that is all I have for you.
Thank you. Do you have an applicant that would like to do a presentation?
The applicant, I do believe, is here, but they do not have a presentation, but they are available for questions.
Great. Come on up to the table.
It's gone.
If you could just state your name for the record, that'd be great.
Sure. Jeff Douglas with Axis Architects.
Thank you.
Do you have any comments at all beyond the presentation that we just had?
I think Ben summed it up pretty good. The reason why we're here, because of the ground floor and visual interest, along with some of those other exceptions, which are essentially dictated by the Rocky Mountain power lines and transformers, kind of dictating a lot of what we need to do. And our goal is to integrate the visual interest into the facade, as opposed to just having something that's slapped on. So that's why we were trying to integrate the glazing requirement and the visual interest together in one element in the architecture.
Thank you. Do any commissioners have any clarifying questions for the applicant or the staff this time?
So what is that enclosure on the ground floor on, I guess it's Jeremy Street?
Sorry, one more time?
Excuse me? That enclosure, is that the transformer?
It's a screen for, well, it's a transformer location and we're required to screen it. So, oh, yeah, you can't see it. But yeah, it's basically
behind the car, yeah.
Let's see. Right here?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the transformer screening. Due to the location of the high voltage transmission lines, the project has essentially needed to be pushed to the rear property line, and viable locations for the transformer are limited.
There's
Okay,
a
thank you.
35-foot vertical clearance required, and that's why.
I'm sorry,
essentially-
you'll have to speak right into the microphone. I
Sure.
can't hear you at all.
There's a 35-foot vertical clearance required for the transformer, so our building had to be pushed back slightly. That's why we couldn't meet the 25-foot depth requirement.
Okay, and so, but the transformer is not included in that, so it's okay for it to be in the setback of the transmission. That's where the transmission lines are, right?
My interaction with Rocky Mountain Power, they told us that we could have, basically that's one of the only locations we can place the transformer.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah.
Thank. Oh,
What's the glazing? Is there glazing treatment for that ground floor, or is it going to be or because I mean, if that's the visual or that's the visual interest, but it's also putting someone's, I mean, those units are going to be hard to sell. They're kind of
So that side is 100 South. The ground floor use is met on that side. The ground floor use visual interest is only for the Jeremy Street facade. They do meet the overall glazing percentages as well of the structure.
I'm more just asking about like the privacy versus
Sure.
the visual interest of that. If it's going to be just reflective glass, or if there has to be a curtain behind it because it's right into living space.
Sure, I think that's a great question. We looked into possibly having a tint on the glass, but I believe it's required to be clear glass currently in the code. So, I mean, I agree that there could be a privacy element on the glass with a film or something like that if that's could be approved. But the glass is required by the zoning requirement, so we're kind of doing the best we can to meet everybody's needs.
Okay.
Thank you. It's time for the public hearing now. If anyone would like to speak on this item, you can approach the podium. You have 5 minutes if you're representative of the podium back there, sir. That's okay. You have 5 minutes if you're a member of a recognized community organization, or 2 minutes if you're a member of the public.
All right, my name is Kurt. I have multiple properties.
I'm sorry, sir, can you state your whole name?
Kurt Warren.
Thank you.
I have multiple properties. One is 2 doors down from this proposal. I'm not against the building, taking away the view from my backyard or anything like that. I'm against the impact it'll have for only 6 parking stalls for 46 units. If you go there now, I've been in that area for 23 years. Currently, there's no parking on the street. It's all full from all the construction of the other apartments that are currently being built. From this photo here, going to 9th West, you could put 11 cars on the street. 46 units, they're going to have a lot of cars on there. I guarantee it. I recognize what the zoning is, but if you stand right here, you cannot see a bus stop from any of these. I just think no parking is going to have very negative impact. I get it, 3 stalls or 6 stalls, but I'm saying enough parking to accommodate and not have a negative impact on the neighborhood. So the people already fight for it, but it'd be a problem. And that's my biggest concern and the biggest problem I have. I'm not against development, but I would like it to have a neutral or a positive impact on the neighborhood. Nobody goes down Jeremy Street. The visual impact isn't really going to matter except for the transients that are there right now. But the effect of no parking is detrimental, in my opinion.
Thank you. Any other commenters? No. Thank you. I'm going to close the public hearing on this item. Now it's time for the Planning Commission to discuss this and ask further questions.
I have a question for staff that it seems like this kind of falls more under what we're talking about for the ground floor use that is getting put into the new code where it's split up and this would be a less intense use, so it's okay. That's all right that it's that as opposed to what the code is right now, if that makes sense.
It's the same code. The code is.
Yeah, I'm not understanding your.
So as part of the zoning consolidation, we're now looking at like the ground floor use. There's kind of 2 tiers, right? Where one is more intense, one is less intense, and the less intense one, it's okay to do residential. That's not adopted yet, though, but
Correct.
it is okay that this is residential and in nature, not purely commercial space.
I think they're asking for a modification to that standard for the ground floor use.
Residential uses per the code are allowed to count
Yeah.
as a ground floor use.
Okay.
And the modification is to the depth of that ground floor use, correct?
Correct.
So am I correct in that the back elevation of this building is a solid wall? I mean, it's a blank wall, the whole back elevation.
Yeah, we're right against the property line in that particular instance. So
Okay.
we have a little bit of material changes, but windows are not really allowed for fire separation distance.
Okay, thank you. I have to say, I'm concerned about the parking too. That was the first thing I saw when I looked at this project. But the assumption is, especially with studio apartments and one-bedroom apartments, that especially that demographic, those users will be people who primarily use transit. So that's the assumption, and that's why the parking regulations are the way they are, because this is within a certain distance from the transit, from fixed rail transit. So if it's okay with everybody, I'd like to make a motion. If I can find it. Based on the information presented in the discussion, I move that the commission approve this design review application as recommended by staff.
I'll second that.
Thank you. That's a motion by Commissioner Scheer and a second by Commissioner Mike Christensen. Any discussion to the motion? Okay, we'll vote on it. Commissioner Krasik,
Yes.
Commissioner Christensen, Mike Christensen,
Yes.
Commissioner Scheer,
Yes.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Barry,
No.
Commissioner McCall Christensen.
Yes.
And I'll also vote yes. That's 1, 2, 3. That's 6 votes yes and 1 no. So that application passes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is a rezone request at approximately 256 East, 300 South. The planner is Aaron Barlow. We'll have him present the application to us.
Thank you. Yes, I am Aaron Barlow, a senior planner, and Emily Nelson, the applicant, is here with me. This is a request to rezone the property at 256 East, 300 South. The request is to rezone the property from RMU with residential mixed-use district to the D1 Central Business District, and staff is recommending that the commission forward a denial recommendation to the City Council. For some context, here is the property. It's on about mid-block between 2nd and 3rd East on the south side of 300 South. It's currently occupied by a commercial parking lot. For some visual, here is the property. On the left is from the street, and on the right is from the back of the property. Here is some context. Across the street, there are some commercial buildings, some apartments, the current restaurant. Facing east, you can see there's the Altadena Apartments, historic building there on the corner, and next to it is its sister apartment building. Looking to the west, if it decides to, there we go, is a commercial building that houses many exercise-based businesses, Salt Lake Power Yoga. There's a bike shop and a few other businesses there. Both buildings on either side of the property are 3 stories tall. Here's the Altadena Apartments. Going over what exactly would change with this proposal. The first is building height. In the RMU district, there's a maximum height of 75 feet. In the D1 district, there is no maximum height, though the applicant has indicated they're amenable to a limitation on that through some process. And then there is a minimum height of 100 feet, and you're all aware of. As far as lot standards go, in the RMU district, there are lot width and lot size requirements, density requirements, and setbacks. Within the D1 district, there really aren't there. There are some additional design requirements, but as far as lot and bulk goes, it's much more relaxed. Design standards do require an active ground floor use, more durable exterior materials, more windows. Glass needs to be reflective for at least part of the upper stories, and there are an upper floor step back requirement along the front of the facade. Here I tried to illustrate how master plans either support or do not support the proposal with the green pluses and the red minuses. So with Plan Salt Lake, it does support growth in existing neighborhoods where there's existing infrastructure and transit and other things. But it does discuss downtown's economic and visual dominance, and by allowing the D1 district outside of the downtown area, that takes away from that visual impact. It conflicts with the surrounding character. As you can see, most of the buildings there are 3 stories until you get to about 200 East, where the D1 district continues. In the Central Community Master Plan, it also talks about the transition from downtown to the east, neighborhoods to the east, like East Central and the University, and really focusing on that transition from high intensity to low intensity. And this neighborhood really serves as that buffer between those 2 areas of the city. It also focuses on the competition with downtown. The downtown plan emphasizes 200 East as the boundary between downtown and other neighborhoods. It also focuses on avoiding competition with downtown as far as uses and visual impact go. But it does promote an active mix of uses. So staff's recommendation is to forward that denial. And staff's rationale here is listed out. So it's outside of the established downtown area, east of 200 East. It disrupts transitions from downtown to other neighborhoods. It dilutes downtown's visual and economic significance. The 100-foot minimum height impacts nearby buildings where the maximum height now is 75 feet. Then existing utilities currently do not support D1 scale development. They would need to be amended and upgraded at the cost of the applicant. And then the proposed community benefit is not proportional to the request. And so that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer anything now. We can just move to the applicant.
Let's have the applicant do a presentation or make a statement.
Yes.
Okay. Bear with you. Okay. So it's interesting that we're here today because there's a recommendation of denial, but we still have been working with the planning department.
Sorry, you really have to speak right into it.
Okay.
And be sure to state your name, please.
Oh, yes. He introduced me before. I'm Emily Nelson. I'm the applicant. I'm an architect with 4A Architects. I was saying that we're here even though there's a recommend to denial, because we've been working with the planning department for some time on it, and this was what they recommended we do. When we started with the DRT meeting, we had a planning staff in that who recommended this route. We've worked with the owner for a long time working on this site and what should happen with it. They've owned it since before the apartment building burned down. it was on it, the Roosevelt, that had 48 units, and it was a historic building, but it was lost to arson in 1991. And at that time, the city was not cooperative with any development, so they went to a parking lot, but they've always wanted to build, and they are a family of contractors. So recently there have been changes in how you can fund residential buildings, and it's been a lot more difficult the last few years to try to get any condo building off the ground, especially if it's a new build. And we're not interested in building with wood. And this site does allow, like the visual on the screen shows, up to a 25 feet height with design review approval. And there is an approved building farther east than us for Overland on 3rd for 125 feet height. We're also one mid-rise there away from Broadway Towers that is 125 feet. And like Aaron showed, across the street and about 200 feet down, there is a 335-foot tall Worthington Tower existing. So we still feel like this is a good transition, but the bigger push for us is the way this neighborhood is developing is the small buildings that have the diversity of use are being torn down, and they're being replaced with large buildings that no one can enter if they don't live there. And the way the zoning is written, it's supposed to be this increased walkability because you should have 1 to 3 stories of mixed use underneath residential use in every building. So as they're built, you should have an increasingly diverse number of services for people to walk to. And it's not happening that way. And I think it has to do with the difficulty of financing a mixed-use residential building. So we're proposing to offer something that is full of services for a neighborhood, and it's a neighborhood geared hotel and mixed-use building with parking. And we don't imagine that the parking will be entirely used by the hotel. It will have 262 spaces and about the same number of hotel rooms, but we don't think most people will need a car while they stay in a downtown hotel. The other uses I've listed in the proposal, but I just want to emphasize that they are for the neighborhood. And we want the neighborhood to feel welcome and to come in and use the hotel because it's a symbiosis kind of hotel. They advertise it for people to come stay there who want to feel like they stayed in a specific neighborhood and not in some kind of faceless, I was at the top of a tower of a convention hotel and I was in Salt Lake, but I don't know it. So they try to do things consciously to pull the local people in to use the building. And the number one thing that I have been working with the brand to allow is a kind of a limited item grocery store on the ground floor because they'd rather see the lobby first thing. But I've got the lobby on the second floor and all the ground floor space that's not taken by connecting from Moffett Court to 300 South is occupied by a cafe and a cafe shop so that local residents can get fresh food that they need daily by walking and get local produce, fresh milk, eggs, bread attached to the cafe. And this is alongside the walkway that connects Moffett up to Broadway. And everything else on the ground floor is kind of taken up by connecting the traffic as well, which the traffic department was happy to see, the parking access. But other things in the building, which you might assume are only for hotel guests, are for the local residents. The hotel offers memberships for using the pool, the spa, the fitness center, the Turkish bath. And the rooftop has one bar associated with it, with the pool, and then most of the rest of the building is designed to be a local events center. So this is like events for life events, like birthday parties, weddings, retirement parties. So you could have a birthday party dinner with your friends in a greenhouse on the roof and have the rooftop gardens there for after to sit by a fire. And this is something that we hope locals will use. And the main lobby has a 24-hour shop, which is primarily stocked for the hotel guests, but I guess it could be a kind of convenience store if you're in the neighborhood. But the point is, it's to make this neighborhood more walkable, to have more services, more employment, more opportunities. It has an art gallery off of the lobby. It has co-working and meeting spaces off of the lobby. And all of these are to support the neighborhood. And I have some slides which basically speak for themselves. There's only 7 of them, and they address the reasons that the staff have for not recommending a favorable or recommendation to the city council. So I've numbered their bullet points over here and have some response to each one on the side. So on this slide, I have 3, 4, and 5, but they're not covered anywhere else because I think they're simple to take care of. For example, number 5, the utilities. We've known about that since the comments came from the DRT, and we think it's a non-issue. We can take care of that during construction. We know about it, so it's like a check mark. And number 4, it says D1 minimum height 100 feet. The current zoning allows 125 feet with design approval. And number 3, it's outside of D1, but it is 140 feet from the closest D1 zone property. And according to some downtown plans, it is considered downtown. And I have some references that in these slides. I don't know how much more time I have or if I'm already way over. But the idea that it's in downtown is kind of repeated in the staff comments. And maybe I'll just skip to proposed community benefit and skip to my last slide, because it looks like there are several ways that you can meet the community benefit. This building has 4 stories of public space plus the roof. And so it seems like there's a great amount of possibility for that commercial use. And I don't think that there's anything in the ordinance to imply that that commercial use has to be on the ground floor, only that it's compared to the site and the area developable or available for commercial use. So if they would consider the large amount of commercial spaces on the other floors, then that would go a long way, except it doesn't say what percentage we need to meet. So anyway, there are all these other options. Another one was that while we have the utilities opened and trenching in the streets and we're upgrading pipes, that we upgrade the utilities further so that more development can be done. And that is another option under, I can't read this close. Anyway. Some of this is self-explanatory, and it's all in these slides. This image right here shows from the downtown plan, the Broadway district, and the Wade's parcel is the blue rectangle to the side here just north of Library Square. So it's showing it in the district called the Broadway district in this downtown plan. And there are other plans where it's described as being in the central business district or downtown. And I've listed those on my original application in the table. There's an image down here showing the transition in heights. The Worthington Tower across the street, the line shows where D1 stops. There's the 125-foot Broadway Tower. Our number of stories is kind of irrelevant because they're so tall, but 185 feet is what we're currently guessing we would need based on data that our hotel chain has. But when we get closer to final plans, we'll pay for a very detailed feasibility study. And I don't know if the number of hotel rooms will drop and we'll lose a story, but this is our best guess currently for what makes sense for that number of services. And then there's the Overland 125-foot building there to the east along 300. So you will have this, right? They'll have this. You can give it to them. Maybe. He will maybe give it to you.
I will put it in the public record.
Yeah, the presentation is part of the public record.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I think I've covered everything.
Thank you. Do any commissioners have any clarifying questions at this time?
I have a question for staff. With the big zoning consolidation project, what would this area be rezoned to, and what would the height limits be under that zoning?
So the RMU, and correct me if I'm wrong, is going to the MU8 district, which is up to 80-ish feet, give or take, depending on the use and the building form. Yeah, that's
The maximum
feet.
height's 90 feet.
90 feet. Thank you.
And that doesn't change with design review?
No.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, I want to clarify real quick before we start the public hearing that we're hearing this item, it's a legislative item, so we don't make the final decision on this. Salt Lake City Council does that. We make a recommendation based on what we hear tonight and the staff report that we've read and our understanding of the guiding documents. So we'll make that decision tonight, and then the ultimate decision will be made by the Salt Lake City Council. I just wanted to clarify that real quick. So now it's time for the public hearing. If you want to speak on this item, you can approach the podium. You need to state your name for the record. If you're a member of an recognized community organization, you can speak for 5 minutes. If you're a member of the public, you can speak for 2 minutes. Your statements become part of the public record, and we'd love to hear from you. So if you want to speak on this item, please approach the podium and you can say your name and then say your piece.
My name is Marvin Redding. I'm on the board of directors of the Broadway Towers Association. So we are a stone's throw away from the building, and I have a general concern, but you already know that question. What we really need in that neighborhood is more residences, and frankly, we need more condominiums because there's a real value in ownership. Now, I don't know the economics of that, but it seems to me like this is not going in the direction that the neighborhood needs. But our biggest concern, and the problem that we have at Broadway Towers, is the noise level. And our biggest concern with this project is the rooftop with a bar and a swimming pool and events, music, dancing. How is noise going to be taken care of? With a boutique hotel, with a bar, and how are they going to shut it down at 11 o'clock so that we can sleep? I assume that, again, the community benefits of having a convenience store or something has to be weighed against the inconvenience of increasing the noise level. And so I would like to say that that is a community concern.
Thank you.
My name is Mary Beth Rains. I'm also a resident of Broadway Tower, and I'd like to, in addition to what has already been said, I'd like to add a thing or two. The first is regarding the noise. I don't think that maybe a hotel would want all parties and noise to stop at 11 p.m. Because if one wants weddings, birthday parties, other pool parties, and say you'll have to leave at 11 o'clock, this is not the normal course of events for these kinds of celebrations. The next item that I am concerned about is parking. So even though many parking slots are proposed, if you are having celebrations or events outside of just hotel guests, you'll have more parking than provided for hotel guests, even though some may be accommodated by those party guests. The parking on this street is already oversubscribed. So during the daytime, but particularly at night, there is no parking on the street, and one must walk several blocks or find other transit in order to be able. And I think that if there are parties there or other events, people will try to park, come and go, and so there'll be noise on the street, not joists above the 13th floor and so on. Back to the noise on the top. Believe me, our residents in the Broadway Tower will call if there is a noise variance and it comes on after 11 o'clock, because we already have in other situations. The last one is that I agree with the idea about that the benefits listed by the proposed building way development don't outweigh the community situation.
Thank you, ma'am. That's time.
Am I done? Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I have a request to speak by Cindy Cromer.
My name is Cindy Cromer, and I hadn't planned to make remarks tonight. I realize that I'm talking to some professional planners on the commission and people who have deep experience in development, but I want to be really clear that the zoning issue is separate from some package of amenities that this particular proposal might entail. So the zoning issues in the D1 are what's on the table. And it would take an elaborate many-page development agreement to assure that we got some of those things in the final project. The second thing I want to say is that this neighborhood is on life support. Last Wednesday, I walked this corridor with the mayor and a large contingent of Salt Lake City Police Department from Hildegard's Pantry to the public library. I would not have made that walk at night by myself, and I felt comfortable with the large number of the police force with me. It is essential to consider the impact of a new project here on building community and neighborhood cohesiveness and the people who stay in a hotel are transients. The people who would be part of the community are the doormen and the other workforce people there. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a request to speak by Annie Isaacson and Alex. Please state your names. Thank you.
Alex Hamley.
Annie Isaacson. We're from the Sampson Altadena HOA. I'm the HOA president. I live in the Sampson building. Alex lives in the Altadena building. We're speaking for the HOA. We're in a 120-something-year-old building. It's 3 stories. It's not going anywhere. We've almost $1 million have put into it in the last 4 years and much more going in to restore it. Across the street from us is a very large YWCA that is full of the largest amount of women and children cohabitated in the city. We have people with disabilities and young children in our HOA. It is a family, young community. We have a vibrant restaurant area, bakeries, gourmandies, Current, the car wash. These are all 1-story buildings that endear people to want to live in this neighborhood. That's the scale that's not leaving because it's successful. It has regular clientele for decades. The YWCA is not leaving. We're not leaving. There are many other 3-story buildings. I have participated, as others in our neighborhood and our HOA, in the zoning merge, and we respect the efforts there. The Worthington building is in the downtown district. This lot that's being proposed is not. It's also right in the center of the lot, and 185 building would basically create a gigantic windowless wall dividing our neighborhood, blocking out light, not providing the type of
That's time.
services. Please don't approve it.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else like to speak on this item? Go ahead. Thank you, sir.
Sean Wade, I'm representing the owners on this project. We've wanted to build something on this land for a long time, and we have not been able to find the meeting of city approval and financing in order to do that. We tried to rebuild that building that was existing, and due to the size of the lot and the parking requirements at the time, we couldn't do that. We now have the opportunity to put something on this lot. We've been criticized for 30 years of having a parking lot, that the parking lot is a blight to the city. That the parking lot, developers just want to put in parking lots. We've heard that on the news. We've been criticized for having that parking lot. We now have the opportunity to produce a building on here. We could put an apartment building on here, but the problem with that is to put a building of the quality we have to the height, we can't find people to finance that. You notice there's nobody putting in condos right now. Nobody's doing condos, and that's another discussion for another time, but that's not our fault of why that is. There's financial reasons for that and legal reasons for that that make that not conducive at this time. So there's very little condos being built at this time. As far as this is a hotel, when we've talked to the neighbors, we have most of the neighbors in favor. When we talk about putting in an apartment building, most of the neighbors are saying, hey, we don't want another apartment building because they bring their dogs and they use our property to go to the bathroom on. And as far as the noise, we can do a development agreement. We can shut down the pool at 11 if that happens. We're not asking for the noise. As far as the noise, As far as a party or an event in the building, we have 2 event spaces inside the building where most of the weddings and things are going to be happening. I can't imagine a wedding party at 11 at night on the rooftop. I don't think that's going to happen.
That's time.
Okay.
Thank you for your comment. Anyone else want to participate in the public hearing? Okay, thank you. I'm going to close the public hearing. I'll summarize really quick the things that I heard in the public hearing. Concerns about noise from the proposed use, concerns about parking, the neighborhood context, and also a consideration of what could go on this property, if not for rezoning or the idea that's contemplated here. I'm going to give the applicant a few minutes to address the public comments if you want to.
I could agree with Sean that it's trying to be a good neighbor in a neighborhood as a neighborhood hotel. And I think that they would agree to put a limit on the late night use of the rooftop amenities.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we're going to go into executive session, and the Planning Commission can discuss this, ask more questions, make motions.
I have a question for staff. So you may or not know this, you may have to defer to the planning manager or director, but in the proposed RMU 8, does that zone allow for hotels?
It does.
Okay. So as far as the discussion item, I mean, in the staff report, you kind of mentioned that we could consider other zones, but I feel like that's an odd discussion knowing we have this consolidation on the table, and so the other zone would be MU8. I think if we're talking about zoning, I've been generally not in favor of rezoning parcels that aren't contiguous. If we land a new zone in the middle of a block and it's not what's around it, and I've pretty much been consistent on that, so I continue to not think that is the best approach at zoning, but and that's really what's before us is the zoning proposal. The use itself, I think a hotel is fine, and as far as noise, I don't know that you would even need a development agreement for that because county noise ordinance will kick in before anything else, and that's what rules all of Salt Lake County is that noise ordinance. So if that's sufficient for the rest of the city, it's sufficient here as well. So I'm in concurrence with staff's recommendation, mainly because I don't think the placement of this parcel, having a new zone in the middle of the parcel, is the best way to approach how a block develops, changes, or grows. And that's my primary reluctance to give a favorable recommendation. I also don't think a D1 zone is the appropriate zone in that we have a limitless height. And that actually is probably more important to me than the other part. Because if we do recommend a rezone and it can always turn out to be something different than what gets proposed. I don't want to, demonize the parking lot there, although I hate surface parking lots myself. I think that the owners are probably really well-intentioned and want to do something great here. So it has nothing necessarily to do with that, but I think you open up the possibilities. We have to look at what could happen, and a limitless height in this particular parcel is also something that I don't think is advantageous.
I kind of wish there was a zoning sort of between MU8 and D1, and maybe D2 fills the bill, but maybe it doesn't exactly, because what I'm hearing here, and parking, I mean, there's no requirement for parking, whether this is its current zoning or MU8 or D1. So the parking issue is the same, no matter no matter what you do with the zoning. If the uses are going to be in MU8, you said that hotel would be allowed. Is that correct? Nick, sorry.
Conditional or permitted?
Sorry, it's a conditional use? Okay, so
Is it? I don't know. I'm asking. It's just permitted?
a hotel again. Hotels are allowed in MU8?
Yes, permitted use.
A conditional use. Okay, so under zoning that may or may not be adopted very soon, that the objection to use also kind of dissipates. So now what we have is objection to height, and also I think Commissioner Berry's point about it being sort of the middle of the block. And so the current MU zoning would allow 125 feet with design review. And since we don't actually know what's going to go on here, is that correct?
I wanted to correct that.
Okay.
There was a recent amendment that took away that 125 feet. The project that you looked at today on the consent agenda was approved prior to that change.
Okay.
So 75 feet is the maximum height in the RMU district now.
But this project has an application in before that.
This one did not. No, the one on the consent agenda for Overland on 3rd, where there's a...
Okay.
The extra height in RMU went away with the zoning incentives project. So you can get that extra height only if you're using affordable housing incentives.
Okay. Okay. So the zoning jumps in the space of 200 feet, or even actually jumps from one place to another, one line to another, from nothing in terms of height limit to 75 feet, which I think is not actually a good transition. It is a very limited transition. I'm not sure how we accommodate this particular issue. The whole street seems, I mean, if you have the Broadway lofts, Broadway towers, just one lot over, that is already, I can't remember now, but 165 feet or something. It would not, and that is not earth-shattering in any way. And you have the very tall Worthington Tower. There you go. Thank you very much. 335 feet, 200 feet away. And I understand that the historic apartment building is buffered to a certain extent by a parking lot. I don't know the status of that particular lot, whether it's an apartment or not. We don't know, so it could be developed with a 75-foot project or 90-foot project as of right pretty soon, right? So all of these, I'm kind of leaning toward some kind of a development agreement that limits the height of this building and allows a hotel use.
I was actually going to suggest the same thing, that since we have an applicant who has signaled their amenability to be willing to work with a development agreement, that is something we probably want to consider.
So would that mean we'd have to change it to D1, or would D2 be a more appropriate zone? Staff?
The maximum height in the D2 is 120 feet.
Okay.
So D1 is really the only option for this proposal, which is probably why that recommendation came from other staff members. Was like, this is the only district that this proposal would work in. So you need to pursue that one.
We can have more discussion. We can have a motion.
I have just a couple of comments. I do like the kind of image that is being painted of this kind of space that provides a lot of amenities for the neighborhood and for the city at large. Under the current zoning, there is a incentive to the highest and best use of the current zoning is likely to be an apartment building of some kind. And although that may not be condos, which I would love to see happen, but financing's not going to allow that. But some kind of apartment building currently is likely the highest and best use. So whether that's rentals in the neighborhood, there is a space that that in our housing crisis, that highest and best use seems like a positive thing to me. And the plans that we have, Housing SLC, do support that kind of direction. And so my impulse is if they want to build something right away before the MU zoning comes into place, then we allow the highest and best use to be the thing that gets built, which is housing, in my opinion, but I also am not. And then if they are able to build a hotel in the MU zoning in the future, then that's a thing that they can do. But currently, I see the line kind of, although it is a little tricky, the line of the downtown zone is this, is already pretty established and has been established for a long time. And under the current zoning, I would like to just see the parcel become the highest and best use of what it can be in the current zoning or the future zoning. So that's my kind of comments, although I do respect and appreciate the amenities that the project is proposing, but we are talking about a zoning change, and there's no way I can know for sure that those amenities would take place. So I'm talking about zoning, and I think highest and best use of zoning currently seems reasonable to me.
I'm willing to make a motion if there's no more discussion. Okay. This is for PLN PCM 2024-00423. Based on the information presented and the discussion, I move that the Commission forward a negative recommendation to the City Council to deny the rezone and zoning map amendment request.
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Berry and a second by Commissioner Krasik. Any discussion to the motion? Okay, we'll start voting. Commissioner Berry?
Yes.
Commissioner McCall Christensen?
Yes.
Commissioner Mike Christensen?
No.
Commissioner Krasik?
Yes.
Commissioner Scheer?
No.
Commissioner Burrows, that's me. I'll vote yes. Commissioner Scott?
Yes.
Okay, that's 5 votes yes, which means it passes, 2 votes no. So we will forward a negative recommendation to rezone this property to the Salt Lake City Council. They will have another public hearing on this item, and they'll vote in the future, but I'm not sure when, so stay tuned. Thank you very much.
I just it was one of those things where it blended with the word before, so I just wanted to. Yeah. I mean, it did influence me deeply, so.
Seems to be like there should be something. 90 feet.
The next item on our agenda this evening is an alley vacation request at approximately 1409 South Edison Street. This is another legislative item, so we will be making a recommendation to the Salt Lake City Council, and they will make the decision in the future. The planner is Diana Martinez, and I'll have you present the application to us. Thank you.
Good evening. This is an alley vacation request. I've put portion. Oh yes, you want to see it? Okay. I've put portion of alley because it is just a very small portion behind or adjacent to 1409 South Edison Street. This portion that is requested to be vacated is approximately 11 feet wide by 52 feet long, and it is located at the north end of the alley. I'm going to show you a different map in just a moment, accessed from Cleveland Avenue. The south part of the alley would remain open. The recommendation is based on the findings and analysis in this report. The planning and staff recommends that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council. Okay, we're going to use this map. So I just wanted to point out this alleyway is not contiguous from 13th South, which is at the top of this map, all the way down to Cleveland Avenue, which is the yellow line at the bottom. The yellow line here, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but in the middle is Edison Street, and it also is not a contiguous street. It is separated by a state building that is not owned by the state, but is used by the state, and it fronts on State Street. How's that? So you can see with these black lines here that this is where Edison stops on the north side of this parking lot. This is where the alley from 13th comes in, and it stops at this point, and then it picks up again at this point, and it goes down to Cleveland. So the portion that the applicant is asking for is just the portion adjacent to his property. So this map is showing you, this is a plat map, this is showing you how those alleyways were created. So if you can see my cursor in the red box, this is where the applicant is asking for the requested alleyway to be vacated. That was created with the Capitol Avenue Addition subdivision. The property that I was talking about earlier that the state uses is part of the the Plat A Big Field Survey. And then the rest of the alleyway from that state property on to 13th is from a NISE subdivision. These are pictures taken from Cleveland Avenue. The left one is from Cleveland looking north. The one on the right is kind of midway looking north. And then the one on the top left shows the gate that blocks the alleyway that is adjacent to the applicant's property. And then the one on the right is how the applicant has used that property. Again, the planning staff is recommending that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council. The applicant is here, and he does not have a presentation, but is ready for questions.
Thank you. Do the commissioners have any clarifying questions?
I do for staff. So is that gate legal?
Is it legal? It is not. So this application came to us because of a code enforcement file. Mm-hmm. The property has not been used for any alleyway because it does not continue on. I'm not sure that you'll have to ask the applicant, but I don't know that it was him that put the gate up, but it's been up for quite a while.
So beyond the gate, it would come out to that parking lot.
I'm sorry, will you repeat that?
Beyond the gate, if we were looking beyond that, the alley goes from Cleveland then to the parking lot. And was it ever legally closed off there?
No. So based on this, like I'm showing you how it was platted, it has always gone to that point. And then, so it was only from Cleveland until the north point of the applicant's property.
Right, but then it comes out into this R2 zone. Is it coming out into a building?
No, it's coming out to that parking lot.
Right.
So it's like right here.
So it has, so I'm asking, was there ever a legal vacation of
No.
that point?
No,
So, okay.
it was platted that way.
That was what I wanted to know.
Yes, thank you.
So just to help me see slightly more, if you go back to the picture of the gate, beyond that gate, there's that concrete wall, and past that concrete wall is that yellow area on the map, right? That you were just barely showing?
Okay, I'm gonna skip back. So, oh, you wanna see this?
Yeah,
So yes, but this area right here is a parking lot.
And that's what's beyond that concrete wall.
Correct.
And so the gate is on the southern side. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I
Correct.
just had to orient myself.
Yeah, so this is where the wall is, this is the parking lot.
Okay. Thank you.
So then a follow-up to that,
Yeah,
that wall was not legally constructed to block the alley if on the plat map it goes into the parking lot.
that wall is on their property line. It was never, it doesn't block the alley. It was platted that way, so like I was showing you on this one.
So it's platted as a dead-end alley. That's what I'm trying to ascertain.
Right, there was no alleyway that went amongst this blue, in this blue square. There was no alleyway. It was not vacated. It was never platted that way.
Because there are a number of alleys, even in my neighborhood, that don't go the full length, right? But so that's what I wanted to try to understand is the legality of how this empties into the parking lot, but it never did on this plat map.
Nope,
Okay.
nope.
Is the parking lot in general fenced in? Like, is it closed off, or is it just you can walk in?
You can. So like on this picture, this map that I had, this aerial, Edison from Cleveland comes into that parking lot. And then there's also access points from State Street. From Edison, coming from 13th, it stops and there's a wall. So you can't come in from the north side of Edison.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you. We're going to have a public hearing now.
Do you want to speak to the applicant?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you didn't have something to say. I thought you were.
If you have questions, he's here for you. Go ahead.
Yeah, my name's Davis Otway. I live at 1409 South Edison Street with my wife, Brianna Benabos. We bought the property in 2011. The gate was already up. We actually thought the property was ours all along because it passed inspection. I did add the pull-up bar and the garden beds in there. I'm here to happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Okay, we'll have a public hearing now. I have a request to speak on this item by Kathy Faulkner.
I'm here for support.
Oh, okay. In support, not wishing to speak. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else want to speak on this item? Okay, I'll close the public hearing. To summarize, I didn't hear anything in the public hearing. Now it's time for us to discuss this item. So go ahead if you want to say something.
Is there a way, and this is a question for you, Diana, is there a way to grant an easement of use to this owner rather than to vacate it?
I'm going to defer to our attorney for that.
Okay.
So the application before you is a vacation, so that is what you need to make a recommendation about. If your recommendation, it's kind of for the petitioner to divine his own destiny about what interest in the property because there are different city processes, different statutory provisions, different standards the city would apply for an easement as opposed to a vacation.
I
So
understand
it would kind
that.
of
I'm
need
just
to
asking whether
restart.
it is possible within the way the city does things for an applicant to request a use easement.
Yes,
Okay.
just it's a different process.
I understand that. Okay. So the reason I'm asking this question is that I'm not in favor of vacating an alley that may potentially in the future be connected to another alleyway. Let's just assume that that big old parcel there that the state sort of occupies sometimes is redeveloped, and that we need that alley easement to get from one side of the alley behind Edison Street, or whatever it's going to be called, to the other, because the connectivity that we might be able to have. Diana, can you go back to the plat map? That one, thank you. This property here, that's the Plat A Big Field Survey. All of this property used to look like this. You know, all of these used to have all of the two subdivisions that are south of there. That all used to be one lot. And there's three more lots ahead, up north of it. So you can see that these are all the big, and at some point in time, someone may want to redevelop those in the same pattern or in a similar pattern to what's there. And I don't want to deny I would like the petitioner to have the ability to use that property until that time, but that's not this process. This process is to give him the property. So once we give it to him, we're not going to be able to get it back, probably, ever. So it would be just a one little place block of a potential alleyway that goes north and south. And so that's why I would not be in favor of granting this.
I feel like on this section of the staff report that talks about processing petitions and the factors considered, this one doesn't comply with all the factors considered because there's a preference to disposing of the entire alley instead of a part of it. So I feel like this doesn't meet, it just doesn't. It doesn't meet that preference. And then the other consideration is, why would we get rid of it because of a lack of use? Where I feel like putting a fence on a piece of alley so it's not used, and then saying it's not used so it shouldn't be an alley. I don't know that that meets that consideration either. So I feel like I'm not in favor of this disposing of this alley either.
Yeah, I also similarly am kind of leaning against vacating the alley, just because I think that in those residential neighborhoods, I live in a similar area in kind of Ninth, and the alleys are a huge asset to how those blocks are broken up. And I think that could be a major farther down the line kind of factor in how residential stuff gets built, whether it's ADUs and those alleys turn into their own little streets that people walk instead of driving down or whatever. So I similarly, I don't mind the use of it, but I think that I get that it wasn't platted that way, but conceptually, like alley to empty parking lot to alley is just an alley if you're walking it. And so I don't want to block out a little piece and cut that out for what I think could be kind of a future beneficial use and a way that the area might end up developing with kind of more frontage along those. So.
Okay, for all the newbies, I'll go back to my alley spiel that I did years and years ago. I have generally also been not in favor of alley vacations because, if the alley behind my house had been vacated in 2007, I would not have been able to build a garage that faces my alley, which I do, and several other houses now do as well. So we take away that opportunity of future development or future property owners. But I also feel like, especially if we're continuing to encourage ADUs, and one of the things we always hear about ADUs is that there's no parking, not that we hear that anymore, but providing an alternate parking area and access for ADUs and alleys is also a really big consideration of how we meet our growing demands for housing types. And there's a labyrinth of alleys in my neighborhood that don't go the whole length, and I walk them a lot, and there may be like a side spur that pedestrians have walked through, and I walk my dog, and so do a lot of other people. But we have a lot of people that use the alleys on foot and on car, like I do, to get to my garage. And so I think vacating alleys is generally something that I don't favor, because we lose that opportunity in the future.
So I just have a comment about that. I totally understand what you're saying, because we've gone through this many times with different applications.
You're not a newbie. The other newbies now know that I
Right.
love my alley.
But on the aerial that I'm showing, so where this black is and this black is, that is a 6-foot cedar block wall. So there is no walking between that portion of the alleyway and this portion. It is completely blocked off with that parking lot. Just wanted to put that
I
out
went there, drove around the walk. The alley's blocked right now because the bamboo trees were covered with snow, so they were tipped over. But that's a temporary blockage where I feel like this, I'm just kidding. They weren't really blocked, but I couldn't drive down it because the bamboo trees had snow on them. But that's a temporary blockage. I feel like even the wall to the parking lot, that's temporary. If you built something else on that plot instead of a parking lot and a office building, it could be anything. So I feel like to say it's been rendered unusable by the
I'm not saying
properties
it,
of this.
well, okay,
Yeah.
I get what you're saying. I'm just, to Commissioner Barry's point, it can't be walkable now. It's not, you can't go from 13th to Cleveland, is what I was pointing out. It is blocked. So.
Right now it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
To Commissioner Scheer's question of an easement, would it, if there was a legal easement to the property owner, would that require there be some kind of easement for other people who also use that alley, or could there be a solo use easement for one person? Because does that make sense? Because
Are you talking about the space between, the alleyway between Cleveland and that fence?
just behind his property. So if everything was left exactly as it is, where he has the legal right to use that space exactly how he is with a fence, but he has a legal right because the city gives him an easement to do so. When an easement is drawn up, does that mean that others also may use that property at all? Can you, because I want him to be able to use this space. Clearly this space he bought it with the belief that it was his space and has been using it as his space, and he's doing the right thing in trying to create a legal argument why it is his space. And I don't want to take that right away from him. If nobody brought up this complaint, it wouldn't be before us, and if it was like that for 25 years, then he would just have legal right.
Right.
No, that is not correct at all. He does not have a legal right to that space. That is public property. You cannot adversely possess government property. I think what you might be looking for would be some sort of, so you'd have to vacate the easement to terminate anyone, otherwise the public has the right to use that entire length at any time. You'd have to vacate that alley. If the city council wanted to grant him some ability to use it, that would most likely be in the form of some sort of revocable license. But if you vacate it, and even then, I don't think you could vacate it and still retain the right to give him an easement. So I think you'd still have to give the public complete access through there. You can't cordon it off just to one user without vacating it.
I see. Thank you.
So let me, just to be clear, and if the city council decides not to recommend, if we decide not to recommend vacation and the city council decides not to recommend vacation, the owner would have no choice but to allow people through there. He would have to open his gate and take away his stuff that's in there.
Yes.
Okay. But he could still come back and ask for he could ask for some kind of right of use over that in a different process. I understand that. Later.
He could do that.
Okay. So, I'd like to make a motion, but I don't have the motion sheet.
I can. Here's one.
That's all right. He's got it. Based on the information presented in discussion, I move that the commission recommend that the city council deny this alley vacation application for the following reasons: that the alley may be useful in the future for the redevelopment of the site north of the property.
Second.
Can I make a friendly amendment?
Sure.
That we further elaborate that it doesn't meet standard C urban design. The continuation of this alley would serve as a positive urban design element.
That is friendly amendment. It's accepted.
Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Scheer. Who did the second? Thank you. Second by Commissioner Scott with a friendly amendment by Commissioner Barry that's been accepted. Anything else? Okay, let's vote on this motion. Commissioner Scheer.
Yes.
Commissioner Mike Christensen.
Yes.
Commissioner Krasik.
Yes.
Commissioner Scott.
Yes.
Commissioner McCall Christensen.
Yes.
Commissioner Barry.
So I just want to say that I think we're all sympathetic to these things and we think in a bigger picture, but we're not deciding this. So the city council will be who makes the ultimate decision. So your journey is not finished in any way by what we do tonight. But I also vote yes.
I also vote yes. That's unanimous. 7 votes to send a negative recommendation for alley vacation to the city council from the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay, we have one more legislative item where we'll be
Madam
making-
Chair, can we take a 5-minute
Sure.
break?
Yes, let's take a
Sorry.
break. We'll come back at
Thank you.
7:10. Our last, well, kind of, our last legislative item. This is a zoning consolidation project where we will be making a recommendation to the Salt Lake City Council. And our planner is Nick Norris.
Thank you. I am pinch hitting tonight for our staff because we didn't feel like they needed to be here for this. So this is a correction. You may recall at the public hearing at your last meeting, we asked for recommendation on the zoning consolidation, and we had identified some small noticing errors. And so before we move forward with the map amendment, we wanted to correct that and make sure those property owners received proper notice, just so we're not having any sort of technicality that could hold the project up. So these are the subject properties. On the left are the properties in the ballpark area. Most of these in the blue and the gray there, were actually changed as part of the ballpark area rezoning. And so the only change that's happening to these is that ballpark rezoning adopted the MU8 zone, and it applied the FBUN2 zone. So those are the FBUN2 are the grayish colors, the lighter turquoise. I don't know if that's a word. If it is now, the MU8. And so you can see that. But what the noticing error was that the properties on the left, in the deeper purple color, they weren't noticed in proximity to that. And so that's what this correction does. So it's a lot of those properties that aren't highlighted in the yellow rectangle that didn't get noticed, whose properties aren't changing. And so this was to let them know that properties nearby will be affected. And then similarly, the small piece up in the avenues on 860 to 868 East 3rd Avenue. This was a project that's actually, I think, just finished construction that went through a zoning amendment probably 2 years ago now, where they were converting an old gas station to townhomes. So our recommendation, obviously, is to forward a positive recommendation to City Council to adopt the proposal. And then this is the similar condition that was in the applied to the rest of the zoning consolidation as well. And that's all we have.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions from the planning commissioners right now? No. Thank you. I'll open a public hearing. If anyone wishes to speak on this item, please let me know. I don't see anyone who wishes to speak, so I'll close the public hearing. And we'll be in executive session so we can make a motion, discuss.
I'm willing to make a motion if I feel like it's straightforward. So for PLN PCM 2024-00707, based on the information presented in discussion, I move that the Commission forward a positive recommendation to the City Council to adopt this zoning map amendment with the conditions listed in the staff report.
I'll second that.
Thank you. We have a motion by Commissioner Berry and a second by Commissioner Mike Christensen. Any discussion? Okay, let's vote. Commissioner Berry.
Yes.
Commissioner Mike Christensen.
Yes.
Commissioner McCullough Christensen.
Yes.
Commissioner Scott.
Yes.
Commissioner Scheer.
Yes.
Commissioner Krezik.
Yes.
And I will also vote yes, so that's unanimous 7 votes towards forwarding a positive recommendation. Thank you, and good job on the MU.
I worked really hard on this part of it.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to do a work session to discuss spacing requirements between certain land uses and residential zones, and that's Nick Norris as well. Thank you.
So this is a follow-up to a request from the Planning Commission after a recent conditional use application that came in to consider initiating a text amendment to a footnote that's in the land use tables that prohibits certain uses that create nuisances from being located within 1,000 feet of a single or two-family zoning district. At the time, the Planning Commission asked for us to, at a later meeting, to put something on to initiate that, to change it from single and two family to all residential zoning districts. And so we provided you with a summary of some of the uses. We did not do, at this point, we have not done a full analysis of all of our land uses. But just the ones that this most typically applies to, which are the list of uses in the staff report that we gave you. And these, I do not have a presentation. So I'm making sure I'm covering what I need to cover here. And so these are mostly uses in the M1 and M2 zones. There's a few in what's called our extractive industry zone. So that's the kind of the gravel open mine pits that are along Beck Street. And then a few in like the CG zone. So our recommendation is, and then in the subdivision, in the proposal, there's also some maps. And I wanted to clarify, because there was a question about what the dashed blue line means. Those are parcels that are within 1,000 feet of either a 1 or 2 family zone or another residential zone. And so the first map is the citywide, so you can see this is really concentrated in the area that is the northwest community, so that's the Rose Park, Fair Park neighborhoods, and in what's the west side community, so Glendale and Poplar Grove. And that's primarily because those zones are typically bounded by M1 zones. So they're the ones that are the most impacted by that. And then there's some zoomed in maps. So what the hashed areas, again, those are parcels. So it doesn't mean that all of that property is within 1,000 feet. As we go through this, we'll provide a much more detailed map of which parcels are impacted so you can see that. We'll probably also provide it as a straight buffer around so you can see those parcels that may be split. So if you remember, that concrete batch plant had a portion that was within 1,000 feet, but the majority of it was outside of it. And so one of the things the commission asked for is, should we clarify how that applies? So if it's the entirety of the parcel or only that portion of the parcel that doesn't. Where this will end up getting tricky is that there are some uses that are allowed in things like public lands and open space zones that have this footnote. And so if we apply it to, for example, if take like an amphitheater, they're allowed in our parks. So if we put an amphitheater in, say, or if we applied this 1,000-foot buffer to the entirety of a parcel, it would mean someplace like Sugar House Park would not be able to have an amphitheater, even though it could be 1,000 feet away from the nearest residential zone or more. So those are the types of things that we'll include in our analysis. I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. And that's all I have. I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Well, I think in that last case, you were just saying there may be some uses that makes sense. There may be some uses where the use distance from the residential makes better sense from the parcel distance from the thing, and we could change those separately.
Yeah, we can try to clarify the footnote, and it may be that in some zones we don't actually need the footnote, and in some zones maybe those uses aren't appropriate.
Yeah.
So we brought up one. Many of you who've been in the area for a while may remember the whole Stericycle use. It's a medical waste incinerator that was creating a tremendous amount of air pollution. Well, we allow medical incinerators as a allowed use in our city. Maybe we shouldn't if it has the capability of producing that much air pollution. So that's just an example of something that we'll consider as we go through this too.
So that would be on the table too, changing the land use to maybe say optional or permitted, just not.
Yeah, if we find a use that we think creates a big enough negative impact and adverse impact that there's no reasonable way to mitigate, our recommendation would be to not allow the use at all, because then we could get stuck with it.
So at this point, what we're looking for is the action we might propose as a commission is to take this to formally initiate a text amendment.
That's right. And in the staff report, there is a motion. I wrote it. It's pretty long because I wanted to make sure it expands to these other potential issues as well.
So Nick, if you haven't done like an extensive review of where you just focused on like the manufacturing in those typical zones. Is there a way to do more of a blanket inclusion of where in the codes we don't allow something within X feet of SR1 or two family homes, that we just also include in those footnotes any residential?
Yeah, I think that's part of our intent is to
regardless.
figure out how to do that. It may mean that there's more footnotes. It may mean that there are some that apply here and not there in a different way.
And then that would negate an in-depth review of all of the codes, but it would include that. Okay, I'm in favor of that approach.
So I'm ready to make a motion, if that's okay.
Real quick, sorry. I just,
Sorry.
You talked about, so how is nuisance defined in this sense? Because I do think it's important to like separate out things like an amphitheater or whatever. Like in my mind, it's more of a health concern and like, you know, something that's an air quality issue or something like that, where it's more about a health concern rather than like if you know there are people who are loud or whatever. I think that might make sense having different like applications of that. So how is it just all kind of any nuisance?
No, so what we would start with the uses that currently have the footnote. And then we would look at those to decide if that footnote is sufficient or not. And we would look at it through the lens as if it were to apply to, in the interest of equity, that it applies to all residential, not just single and two family zones. And so that's what we'd look at. We'd also look at whether the use is even appropriate near mixed use zones where people are going to live, because they may not be appropriate there as well. So that will be part of our comprehensive analysis of that.
All right, cool. Yeah, when you bring up the idea of like the amphitheater stuff, like I do think it's important to separate it out.
Yeah.
So, okay, thanks.
I think it's important to note that the reason that we brought this up is that we felt like it wasn't any measure of social justice that things which might cause pollution would only be restricted from R1 or R2 zones, that all residents should be protected in this way. So with that in mind, I'd like to make a motion. I move that the commission initiate a text amendment to review the land uses that are subject to or should be subject to the 1,000-foot spacing requirement from residential zoning districts. The initiation may include reviewing other land uses that should have the provision applied, clarifying whether the distance applies to the property or the boundaries of a use, and other related provisions that may help protect the health and safety of city residents.
I'll second.
That was a race to second. So we have a motion from Commissioner Scheer and a very quick second from Commissioner Barry. Any discussion to the motion? Okay, let's vote. Commissioner Scheer.
Yes.
Commissioner McCall Christensen.
Yes.
Commissioner Barry.
Yes.
Commissioner Scott.
Yes.
Commissioner Krasik.
Yes.
Commissioner Mike Christensen.
Yes.
And I also want to say, you write a good staff report, Director Norris.
Thank you.
I loved reading it. It was my favorite staff report in a long time. So I'm going to vote yes, too. So thank you. That passes unanimously. Thank you. And that's it for the agenda. If we have nothing else, our next meeting, we don't have one in 2 weeks because that's Thanksgiving Eve. So our next meeting will be the second Wednesday in December. Come back then. Thank you. Thank you.